Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another CarMiZa video. My name is Mike, and if you're not familiar, this is CarMiZa. It is a 1994 BMW 540i with a legendary audio system that I am rebuilding. This system was originally built by Earl Zausmer back in the mid-90s. The car, again, was very legendary. Featured, among other things, 13-inch Bowers & Wilkins woofers in the kick panels that were welded, plates were welded in for those. The car was in numerous magazines, including this one in Car Audio and Electronics. And I am documenting in this series the rebuild of the audio system. My objective is to maintain the same kind of a thing that Earl did, the same design, same concepts, a lot of the same look. As a matter of fact, there is one of my inspirations there, what the car used to look like. And here is what I am rebuilding. There is about 60 or 70 videos on my channel documenting the work thus far on the car. This is an extremely extensive build. In the last video, I completed this, which was the motorization for the floor of the car. In this video, we're going to be working on this toolkit. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so as you can see, again, I've got it mocked up already. There was a lot of time and consideration that went into this so far. I wanted it to kind of sink down, but I also, if you notice, it's going to be suspended over the spare tire. More on that later. It'll look like it's kind of floating is my hope. One of the things, if you've been following the channel, that you may remember is that this hole from BMW is not a perfect circle. It's off by like 3/8 of an inch. Thank you, BMW. And I tried, following that edge, making my circle parallel to this edge. So mine is, was going to be oblong as well. It looked terrible, so I went with kind of a perfect circle at that point. Let me show you how I did that. All right, spoiler alert, the MDF piece is already cut. This piece, the final piece, will be made of aluminum. The MDF will serve as my template for the aluminum. And if you notice, it's kind of tough to tell, but it's really round. Here's how I did it. I didn't have anything that was the exact diameter that I could router to make it round, so I got creative. Again, this is kind of, I'm using a lot of that old school car audio technique. We use things around the shop. We got really creative. No fancy CAD or 3D scanning here. I'm totally old school, staying traditional to this build. So what I did is use this cover off my fan that I've got in my shop, and I wanted it to be similar to this, but a little bit bigger, 3/4 of an inch larger to be exact. So I laid this out, took a washer, which has 3/4 of an inch from here to here, used this and traced this around. You may have seen me do this in other videos. That basically gave me something that was this plus 3/4 of an inch all the way around. I used that, and then I rough cut this with a jigsaw, and then came around and measured it, and anywhere I needed to, hand sanded and got it really good. This thing's probably within a 32nd of an inch of being, perfectly round. So that part is good to go. The next thing I needed to do was deal with the depth. Let me show you how I did that. So this is the fire extinguisher I'm using. For anybody who remembers my Ford Thunderbird Super Coupe, I had a very similar layout in the spare tire well. I'm kind of nostalgic, or very nostalgic, and I want to kind of relive that toolkit that I built. This is an H3R, which is a really high-end dry chemical extinguisher, which is safe for electronics. So mounting the extinguisher, the way it's going to go in is it's going to be basically sunk down halfway into this plate that I'm going to make. So therefore, half of it will be exposed. The other challenge that I'm trying to work on is I want this plate to be as high as possible because I want it to look like it's kind of floating with the lighting coming through here. So I wanted to raise, have this as high up as possible, but I don't want the extinguisher to hit the carpet on the underside of this. There's nothing that sucks more to me that seeing a really cool build like this, and if I was to open this up and you'd see a giant imprint, this is all going to be carpeted, a giant imprint of where the extinguisher is hitting the floor. So here's my solution for testing and placement. This is 1/4 of an inch thick, which represents the thickness of the carpet. And as you can see, I've got a little mock-up of my extinguisher. I'm also using a camera, which is right here. So when I close the actuator, I'm able to see and confirm it's perfect. Okay, so at this point, we're all caught up. You're caught up with what I've done thus far. So as you can see, for anybody new to the channel, I've got a pretty modest tool set up. I've got a cheap skill saw there. with a good blade, a Diablo blade, and then I've got a DeWalt router, a good size, proper router, but just a basic stand. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut the hole for the actuator. To do that, I'm going to rough cut it with a jigsaw. Then I will double side tape a template to it and then flush trim to make sure I got a nice clean straight edge. To do the corners, if you have been watching the series, these are the pieces that I made for the corners of the iPad and the other two pieces that are in the trunk lid cover. I'm going to maintain the same curves, that way visually it's consistent. So I'll double side tape these, router, and get the whole thing cut. So let's go ahead and do that. By the way, if you're not familiar, this is the trunk lid cover I spoke of. There's a couple of videos covering the details on this. These will be 2 display panels, and then this will be an iPad Pro. And again, you can see that radius will be the same in the hole for the actuator. All right, here is the final result. Came out really nice. Everything is straight, square. I measured, looking good. On to the next part. Okay, my next step is to put it in the car, this template, and just double check everything to make sure it fits well. One cool thing I want to show you, if you didn't see the last video, for the linear actuator, I needed a way to be able to secure it, but also quickly be able to remove it. And when I put it back in place, I wanted to make sure it was perfectly aligned. There's a couple of magnets up inside of here. I've got this temporary prop rod. I can pull this out, take the actuator, slip it in, and it locks into the exact place every time. And a final check of the actuator hole. Everything measures properly, and I'm totally digging the curves. I think that's really going to make a big difference, especially when it matches the rest of the curves up there. This I had to measure. I'm having to measure right now to manually place this. Once I build what I'm calling the stilts here in just a bit, this will self-align as well when I put it back in place. So, all right, with that, on to the next part. All right, so here's what this area looks like with the tool inlay out. This is just obviously some mock-up stock just to be able to get it elevated to where I need. If you watched the last video, that is a wheel hub that is welded to the factory spare tire mount, which allows me to ensure that the spare tire goes into the correct location every time, and the actuator is actually mounted to the wheel. So for more details on that, check out that video. So what I need to do at this point is figure out the placement of the tools, and depth is going to be a concern. You'll see why. And also what I'm calling the stilts, which there's going to be, I think, either 3 or 4 posts that hold this toolkit up. And that's what's going to make it kind of self-placing as well. So to figure that out, here's what I'm going to do. I've got my the plate itself. I drew some reference lines, found center, all that. And then I transferred that to some plexi. This is 0.040 inches thick, which makes it thick enough to be, stable enough, but also easy enough to cut. Now we'll take this, put this in that spare tire area, and start to figure out placement of the tools and of the stilts. All right, so I laid out the tools basically where I want them, and then I considered the depth, and I'll show you how I did that in just a moment. The fire extinguisher is in the center of this panel, which I think is important. It's the biggest piece, but in doing so, it forces this gap, which is 1 5/8 inches. Ideally, I would have liked to move things over and spread them out a little bit more, but I think it looks good. I'd rather have the fire extinguisher in the center given a choice. So then what I did is the following. Sorry, one other quick point I want to make. This hole is intentionally in the center of the car, so that had its, exact precise place. All right, so here's what I'm talking about when it comes to the depth. This is the booster I'm using. It's a jumpstart unit made by Noco. I've used their smaller battery chargers, trickle chargers. I actually have one on a small battery down there for the actuator, and the thing works great. I've used them for my Mercedes cars. A lot of those cars I don't drive a lot, so I use their chargers, their trickle chargers, and they've been great. So I'm new to this type of small jump starter, but we're going to give it a shot. Hopefully it works well. The depth of this thing doesn't look too bad, but here's the way it came in the box. It has these cables, and it was in the box like that with both pieces stacked. So I said, all right, cool. I'll do the same thing, and I'm gonna build my tray to accept these cables. That way, if I need to, you know, pull it out, I've got everything right there. And then this thing is gonna be flush with the top of my panel. So that's where depth comes into play. This is 4 inches tall. We also have the fire extinguisher, which is a total of 3 inches tall, 1.5 inches of which is going to be sunk into this panel. Okay, so here's what I did next. I traced each of the items onto the plexiglass and put the piece in the car. And if you notice, I drilled 4 holes on the charger, the booster piece. I drilled a couple of holes here. I've got no concerns with up there. We'll be fine. And then this is going to be a pen light. For any of you car buffs out there, Legit Street Cars is, Alex Palmieri has been a big inspiration for me with my Mercedes car. So I want to kind of pay it back, and I bought one of his pen lights, Legit Street Cars pen lights. I haven't received it yet, and I did email them asking them for the dimensions so that I can get this fabbed up. But that's what's going to be going there. It's a really cool magnetic pen light, super bright and really nice. So, all right, let me show you the other thing I did with these holes. Just to be super safe, the holes that I drilled, I took a screwdriver and I marked 1.5 inches, which is the depth for the fire extinguisher. Chucked here. No problem at all. I can actually probably go down about 3 inches. These are the types of things you don't, you know, you run into later that you've got to fix a problem. So that is good. Then this happens to be 4 inches, which is the depth of the jump start unit. When I go here, I'm 100%. Here, I can see right through there. It's no problem. Here, a little bit closer, but still no problem. This corner is a little tiny bit tight, and at the last 1/8 of an inch, it just barely touches the corner of the wheel. If I have to, this is going to be an aluminum box that's going to hold that component. I will put a 45 on the corner of that, because again, that box is just going to be holding these jumper cables, and there's going to be plenty of room if I need to just very gently take maybe 1/8 of an inch off the corner of the box. So all in all, depth for the tools is good. The layout, the placement, everything is great. So let's go to the next part. Before we do that, one other quick thing I wanted to show you, I haven't shown so far, is I need to make sure I can replicate the height of this. So to do that, I'm just using a piece of straight flat bar aluminum, laying it on the floor, and it's 1.5 inches is the gap that I've got. So that will come into play when we build the legs, what I'm calling the stilts, coming up here shortly. All right, the next part is going to be designing the stilts and figuring out their placement. Their placement needs to be, all right, so welcome to my brain here. This is going to be the placement of what I'm calling the stilts. Those are just simply, they're going to be 4 1-inch square tubing aluminum legs. Initially, I was going to drop them into each of, into 4 of these holes, which are 1.5 inches in diameter, and then have a magnet on the bottom of the leg that attaches to the car. That proved to be a little bit too complex now that I can see the placement of the tools with the plexi, which was super helpful. So now what I'm going to do, slight change in design, is I'm just going to attach the magnets to the wheels in 4 locations. I've got a couple different size magnets. I've tried them and they'll lock into place really well. So what I'm going to first do is make these legs out of MDF just to mock them up, get them into the correct place, especially the angle of my cuts. If you notice, the wheel is at an angle here. So I've got to figure out the angle, get that all mocked up with MDF, make sure everything like a dry run, kind of over-engineer it as I typically do, and then once everything is good, I'll transfer it to aluminum. So let me show you the next part to get the angle. All right, this is not using this tool properly. Joe Schmo, oh my God, buddy. I hope you're not mad. Misuse of the tool 101, but it allows me to get the angle. So I'm going to use this again just to mock up my angle. I'll transfer this to MDF and then we'll start roughing this out. All right, I was fresh out of 1-inch by 1-inch MDF, so I made some, just cut some 1-inch strips of 1/2 inch, CA glued them together and transferred the angle, and now we're going to go ahead and cut that piece. All right, use my chop saw to make the cut. Came out beautiful. You're not living until you've cut aluminum square stock with a chop saw. Here we go. actually works quite well. Came out really nice. I deburred the bottom of those. That's not really going to matter a whole lot. You'll see why in just a bit. Notice also I numbered these, and I'm going to number the location of the car. Although they should all be the same length, I don't trust that the floor in the car is perfectly level. So on to the next part. The next step was to double side tape each of the stilts in its respective location, and then I just took this edge and marked where it intersects. Then I've got to measure, because again, I've got 1.5 inches I've got to go down, plus I need to compensate for the magnet that'll be at the bottom of those, and there's also going to be a plate at the bottom of those as well. So that was basically just to get it roughed out. I think I'm going to use a jigsaw. I don't know, I might use a chop saw to cut these, but I don't trust that this thing is perfectly square this way, so I'll probably cut it fat and then sneak up on them with a file. Okay, to cut it, I've got a clamp to my work table, got some work gloves, my saw set to a really low speed, a Diablo metal cutting blade, and some WD-40, and I just go really slow and it'll cut right through like butter. All right, I'll give you a little bit of coverage here. I went through, when I go through the outside wall, it goes really slow, but then when I'm going, it's really nice. All right, so there's post number 1 in place. It is plumb, the top is square, and I put my straight edge along, and I've got 2 1/16, which is exactly what I need, such that when I put my magnet on, the cap, all of that, the top plate, I'll end up with 1.5 inch gap. So successful there. I'll do the other 3, and then we'll move to the next step. And there we go. All 4 posts are good to go. All right, even though I've got these double side taped in place, I use some temporary hot glue around the base of each of one of these stilts and double check it with a level. This makes sure that they're a little bit more solid while I do the next step, which I'll use the plexiglass for. Problems. I show them even the ugly stuff that maybe other people may not show. The good, the bad, the ugly, right? Even with all the planning I did, the plexiglass, I got a bunch of issues here. So post number 1, no problem, fits perfect, everything's great. Post number 2 gets in the way of the fire extinguisher handle. It was kind of tough to see the angle, especially with the floor in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this one over, drop it down further. I'll cut a new piece and I'll have it land right in here. Not a big deal. I've got the angle, you know, for my chop saw, all that. Post number 3, I don't like how close this is, because again, this represents the finished edge of that battery charger, the booster thing, and I'm going to go probably, I've got 1/8 inch of stock plus at least 1/8 inch of carpet, so I've got 1/4 inch. I've got to pull this back. So this one I'll move up this way. There's plenty of room on the wheel for the magnet, and I'll shorten this one up, so not a big deal. Same angle, I just probably cut off 1/4 inch, slide it up, we're good to go. And then this one, I'm going to have to spin it because obviously, as you can see, it's sticking out of the hole where the actuator goes. So I will make all of these adjustments myself off camera, and hopefully the next time you see this, everything will be lined up properly. Wish me luck. And it's the next night. Sometimes you just need to step back and take a breather. Sorry if I sounded dramatic in that last segment. I was really tired. I worked a long day. It was late, and I was pretty frustrated. This was a piece of cake. It took me about an hour to go through and rethink this and solve the problem. So that still, again, was fine. This one, I just slid it back about 1/4 inch. It's totally fine. And then I had to trim off about 1/16, which I did with a hand file, and made sure it's square. And then that one, if you notice, I had a total of 4 in here. I looked at it today, I'm like, why do I need 4? This is 1 inch stock. This is gonna be super strong, 150-pound Neo magnets on each of these. You know, it's going to be super sturdy. This thing's not going to move. So I just went down to 1 and I slid it in between these 2 pieces. So this is just the hole for the actuator. That's going to stay open. More on that later. And then this would be my pen light, which doesn't require a whole lot of build out underneath here. You'll see what I'm going to do to cradle that, but that doesn't need much in terms of space. So the 3 of them are good to go. And also I ensure that they are completely perfectly square, perfectly plumb, both directions, and they're exactly, all 3 are the same, you know, gap to the floor. So that part's done, disaster avoided. Now it's time to move on to the next part. Okay, the next step was the whole reason I did the plexi. I figured a way to be able to mark where these posts are going to line up and where they need to go ultimately on the aluminum and ensure that they're welded to the exact correct spot. So as you can see, I took a 1 inch by 1 inch piece of paper, cardstock, double side taped it to each of the posts. Now I'll pull this off and I'll cut out those 3 holes. All right, the next step was I cut out the holes that I made, but I went about 1/8 of an inch oversized on each one, basically the thickness of the pen line. Then what I did is after I cut them, I traced that out. This is just, I'm just doing this on the MDF as a test. I'm not gonna be mounting any posts to the MDF. This is just a mock-up, obviously, but this is a test for the aluminum. Now that I cut that, and I mark them, when I take the actual, this isn't one of the legs, but when I take the legs and put it on, you know, with the pen line, I gotta line it up here, but I can see it lines up very nicely. Instead of cutting it exactly the same size as this, marking it, and then, you know, the pen line disappears. So that was my thought there. I like that, I'm happy with it. And I think at this point, with the posts, we are done, or stilts, whatever I'm calling them, those are done. So we'll go from here to the next part. Correction, not quite done with the stilts. I still need to do the end caps, which we're gonna do next. One other quick thing. Today is August 23rd, 2025. I bought CarMiZa August 20th, 2020. So just had 5 years so far with the car. I didn't work on the car the entire time, but obviously, been working on it for a while and still have a long way to go. One of the reasons I wasn't able to work on it in the last few days is the incredible dust storm we just got, which I will show you here. Yeah, I might need to clean the pool. Yeah, that was a good time. It took a few days to clean up the backyard. So we live on 2.5 acres. There's just all desert out there and we get a lot of dust. All right, back to it. So what I'm doing is basically making a little cap that's going to go on the end of each of the stilts, and they're going to be welded on. Each one is going to have a hole and that'll be threaded to hold the magnet. Having a little hindsight here, I decided to drill and tap all of these first. This gap here represents the curve plus a little bit of filing just to trim it down, and that'll get me to the final length. If I try to tap these, you know, and drill them when they were little tiny pieces like this, it'd be pretty difficult. So here we go. All right, all 3 pieces roughed out. So I drilled them, tapped them, trimmed them. They're, you know, almost 1/8 of an inch fat right now. I'll use a hand file and a square, get them all cleaned up, and I will show you the finished product. If you're new to my channel, this is a really cool tool. If anybody needs a link for this, just hit me up in the comments. It allows you to, it's kind of a guide when you're, oh, my tap's coming out here, when you're doing your taps, so that it ensures that it stays vertical and gives you really nice clean threads, especially in real thin material like this, which is only 1/8 of an inch. By the way, if I look a little warm in the video, it's 108 degrees out, so good times. Okay, there's the first one done. If you notice, it looks like I went a 1/16 or so short. That's going to be for my son-in-law, James, who is a master fabricator, to weld. He's going to weld this side. He'll weld this side. I used 1 inch flat bar for this, and this is 1 inch square tubing, so the sides are, you know, the same width. So, and as you can see, I've got it threaded there for the magnet. So that's one done, cleaned up. I'll do the other 2 and get them ready. Here's a quick idea what it looks like with the Neo magnets on there. I'm gonna get silver screws. Everything is stainless in the car, or aluminum in terms of hardware, non-corrosive. And you can see how nicely just doing a simple layout gets that centered. All right, let's get the other 2 done. Okay, the stilt caps all set. One of them, the last one, just because I was using a jigsaw, I'm not making excuses, but again, I'm very transparent. It came up a little short, the hole wasn't gonna be centered, so I made a new one. So I Again, on my builds, I show everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, and I don't want to come across like I'm infallible or everything comes out perfect every time. It's not the case. Do your best, just that's it. That's the name of the game. So, all right, with those done, finally, now it's going to be time to turn my attention to cutting the holes in the MDF plate and getting this finalized and ready to trim the aluminum. Okay, so for all of the gaps where there's going to be carpet in the build, in between trunk pieces, I allotted for 1/8 of an inch. That's kind of compressed, it's tight. It's going to give me a real nice tight fit when I put the panels in, but still not be too tight, hopefully. For this, you know, when I'm needing to take tools in and out of this tool thing, I need to make sure they're not crazy tight. So I took my stilts and just put a piece of carpet in there. Just got it to the point where I can slip I can slip these items pretty easily. Measured it, and I'm at 3/16 of an inch. So that is going to be my gap. All right, at this point, I've got everything laid out on the MDF template. You can see my Legit Streetcars pen light came in. Again, shout out to Alex Palmieri, very inspirational dude, really knowledgeable, super cool channel. If you have not checked that out and you're into cars, he's got some really cool stuff. All right, so at this point, I've got everything traced out. I've allotted for the carpet. I'll go ahead and remove the components and show you what that looks like. All right, and there's my pencil lines. If you notice, that no-coat piece is not square. It is kind of oval shaped almost. So I'm going to use a jigsaw, rough out whatever I can. On the straight edges, like along the fire extinguisher where it's straight, I will use a router and a straight edge, and I will router this. Same is true here. I will router the hole for the pen light. Up here, especially where we get into the shape of the fire extinguisher, I'll use a jigsaw to do this, and then a file and some sanding sticks, and basically get it to where, you know, everything is got the exact size of the fire extinguisher plus 3/16 of an inch on either side to allow for carpet. And that's what it looks like roughed out with the jigsaw. Obviously, I'm going to go through, I'll use the router next and do all the straight lines that I can, and then I'll hand sand the rest of it to get everything the proper size. I mentioned earlier in this video my Thunderbird, and I was kind of reliving that toolkit. Here is my install book. I still have it from that car for the build. And as you can see, I did the same exact thing. 1/4 inch MDF here. Only with this one, I just left that as 1/4 inch MDF. I prefer aluminum these days. I created little straps for the pieces and then covered the whole thing with tin foil, including some fuses. Then I used a filler, like a Bondo, put everything in, allowed for the thickness of the vinyl, and then that's what the final piece looked like. So it was very clean and very cool looking, and again, that's kind of what I'm after here. All right, let's continue. At this point, I've got some scrap straight edge double taped down to the work, and now I'll go ahead and router all of these straight edges. and that's what it looks like with all the straight edges cut. I think I'm gonna leave the small radius on the inside corners here. I think that'll be fine. Same is true with the fire extinguisher. This area here, I'm gonna do all by hand, and this top area by hand as well. More on that in just a second, but you can get an idea. If I was to take the pen light, this will be flush with the surface, and you can see, you know, I've got my 3/16. I'm going to build a box underneath each of these. So, all right, we'll move from there on to shaping the rest of this. This area is not totally critical. We're going to be using some body filler in this section. This is more critical, so I'll start with this area. All right, to tweak this curved edge here, this is pretty square. It's got a little, I'm going to do a little notch for this thing. You can see that bumps out just a touch. This end is pretty much square. What I did here is just took a piece of, this is 3/4 inch flat bar by 1/8 inch, and you can see my markings there. I got basically the curve of this piece, and then use that to get myself a more defined line. So now I'll just go in and hand shape this and just slowly work on it and get this to be the correct gap all the way around. All right, to sand these edges, I'm just using a 60 grit. I do realize, I know some of you are maybe thinking, why don't you take the charger and do something with a router and be able to make a plug and drop it in and flush trim it and all that. I don't have a ton of router bits, so I've got a flush trim 1/2 inch and a couple of other roundovers, so we're going old school and we're doing it by hand. It'll come out good. As luck would have it, the straight part of the charger on both ends is the same width as my sanding block, my sanding stick, so I just went in there and did that. Next, I'll use a file to clean up the corners as well. All right, now you can start to see my vision a little bit more here. I'm just mocking this up. I went around and hand sanded all of that. I decided just to leave that as it was. Got a nice gap here. This piece, the side of it, if you look at it from the side, it's kind of curved on the side. So at its widest point, I'll have 3/16 of an inch, which will allow me to get this in and out. If I put the carpet in there, the carpet will fit in it'll fit in just fine with the carpet. And I've also, if you notice here, this is representing, it's sticking out a little bit, so that will allow me to get an idea what it will look like with the carpet. There's the fire extinguisher just sitting in there, and again, we've got quite a bit of work to do up here still. And then you can see the pen light, that'll just be kind of flushed in as well, and I'm liking that. So from here, I will continue to hand sand the top of the fire extinguisher area and get my gap nice and consistent there. All right, in the fire extinguisher area, I marked the areas that I want to take out. This area, again, is all going to be fabricated using filler. So these cuts are not terribly critical at all, unlike these, which are finished cuts. And here is the fire extinguisher, all set. So at this point, I'm going to check the piece over, just do one last inspection. And then the MDF template is going to be good to go. And then we'll transfer it to aluminum. Quite a bit of work for a piece that's not even going to be used. I do a lot of templates, but I think it's worth it and the work comes out nice. All right, let's continue on. With the MDF template complete, it's time to transfer it to aluminum. So I use 1/8 inch aluminum. Obviously, I could use MDF and you know, just continue with this, but with this build, I really want to bring this to the next level and make it as good as I possibly can. And I find aluminum to be a lot more durable. If you notice, I just took a Sharpie. I double side taped this in place just to make sure it didn't move. I ran a Sharpie all around all the areas. So the next thing I'll do is drill holes in each of these boxes, rough cut, get the material out of there, you know, rough cut the circle. And then from there, we'll be able to flush trim this using our template and cut the aluminum. 107 degrees out. I'm sweating my butt off and I'm covered in aluminum dust, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It's a great time. All right, so that was 30 minutes of work down to 30 seconds. As you can see, when I use a WD-40, I use a Diablo metal cutting blade on a really slow speed. but the WD-40 likes to erode the pen line. So at this point, I've got those items roughed out. What I'll do now is clean everything really good, rubbing alcohol, and then retrace my outside perimeter. I'll cut that off camera and get it all ready. And then our next step is going to be to flush trim the aluminum off of the MDF. Okay, got the aluminum all rough cut. Used plenty of double-sided tape on the MDF onto the aluminum, and everything is good. Got my crazy landscaping mask, and now it's time to have some fun, and we're gonna go ahead and router this. So I've got the garage closed up because this makes an absolute huge mess, but here we go. Yeah, definitely suggest doing this outdoors if you're going to do it. It makes a really big mess, but it's worth it. All right, got that corner all cleaned up. Everything is clean. This really does come out nice. I do take a little piece of sandpaper and especially get this edge because it actually is sharp. You're really machining it, you know, and you get a nice edge. So you can see that. Everything came out really good. So now we'll separate these, get everything cleaned up, and go on to the next part. All right, and there we go. Everything cleaned up. I also took a random orbital and 40 grit sandpaper and scuffed the whole thing up. That is in preparation for the carpet. I believe that's gonna help the adhesive stick better when I go to carpet this piece. So with that, I'm gonna wrap up this video. I was kind of hoping to get everything done with the toolkit in this video, but I'll leave it a cliffhanger. In the next video, we're going to work on building the trays for underneath each of these pieces, have James weld those pieces and get the legs in, the magnets, and do the final fitment, and then finish off the bottom of it, which should just be just a black paint. But that should be it for now. Thank you very much for watching. If you have not already, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all very soon. Thanks again. Take care.